right. Welcome back, everyone, to season three. So believe it or not, our third season of Buying Local. And this is episode two. Our last episode, we had Saratoga Dry Age Cuts, which, if you're listening to this episode right now, that will get published sometime right around September 1st, which is next week, next Monday, or next Sunday, September 1st. But today, episode two, season three, I'm joined by Ronald Richards from R.A.S.P Controls. And Ron, I always say Ron, but do you prefer Ronald or Ron?
Ron is fine.
Ron is fine. Okay. I'm like, he might not even like Ron. What about Ronnie? Is that reserved for like family?
I have a son that we call Ronnie. So
okay. All right.
I'll use Ron, he can use Ronnie, and if we're getting official, then you can say Ronald.
Then you say Ronald, all right? Or Mr. Richards. But, so Ron, you own a company called R.A.S.P Controls.
Correct. Yes.
And it's funny, like how long you've been there for how long?
R.A.S.P has been 29 years. So next May will be 30 years.
Wow. Good for you. That's a long time to own and run a business.
It's been a really long time. It's been
yeah, right? Does it seem like an eternity?
Pardon me?
Does it seem like an eternity?
I look back and there's been so many hurdles up and down over the years, but no, I've enjoyed every minute of it. So it hasn't. Yeah. It seems like it went by like a flash of lightning. Actually,
no kidding,
really fast.
I know. I was like, so I've been doing marketing about 10 years, and I guess similar thing. Sometimes it just seems like, wow, I feel like I've been doing this forever, and then other times, like you said, it's kind of like blink of an eye.
And if you're having a good day or a bad day, I guess.
That definitely matters. So tell our listeners, because I'm not sure if everyone's familiar with R.A.S.P. Tell them what do you guys do over there?
So R.A.S.P Incorporated is an industrial controls and automation company. That all sounds great, right? I joke often because I say that even my wife still doesn't know what I do. So
right.
But basically, we design industrial controls. We program them. We have computer programmers. We are a manufacturer of the products. We install them. We service them. And it's generally around automation, but it doesn't necessarily have to be automation. It's any industrial controls application. It could be for the food and beverage, aggregate, crushing stone, medical, anyone that needs a control system, electronics or brain to control any type of application. We often do something in that company.
I was earlier this morning, I was talking to Kristen about the podcast, and I was telling her, and she's like, I think you guys met at our client appreciation party there. And she's like, what do they do? And I was trying to explain it, like what controls means. And I was like, like if there's like a manufacturer or whatever, and they've got like a control panel, and you're like pushing buttons to make the machine do something, like that's an example. That's not every example, but that's a example of a controller, and it like controls like how long a machine does this and does that, and when it does this. And is that a very dumbed down, simplified?
It's actually a great example. Many of our control systems have a box with push buttons and switches, and sometimes they're a touch screen that you can touch. But it is kind of hard to explain for people that aren't in this world or in our industry. But yeah, basically it's wires, electronics, controls. The easiest way most people can understand is, I say, a conveyor. Most people know what a conveyor is. A conveyor has a motor on it, and we would control that motor. That would be a very simplistic control system, but
right.
People can wrap their head around that one sometimes.
What do you think's like the most like kind of crazy complicated? If you're allowed, I don't even know if you're allowed to talk about that stuff. Yeah. You're kind of getting into some IP and other people's stuff. But what's like the craziest, most complicated controller that you guys build?
That's a good question. So if I back up a second, we don't have any product of our own. Every single product that we design or build or program is for somebody else. So that means almost everything we do is new all the time, which makes our job very interesting. So we have done a lot of things over the last 29 years. Many of them are very challenging, very difficult, some not as much. But one time we did a job for, it was a company called New York Air Brake, and that was many, many years ago. But the system was just so complicated, and what they wanted it to do was so complex. And we just had a whole team of engineers like looking at formulas and scratching our heads and how do we make this thing work? And we finally figured it out. But it was testing the brakes that go on trains,
Okay.
locomotives. Very, very tight tolerance, very critical. And obviously, you're trying to stop a train, you don't want to put a brake on there that's faulty. And this system tested those brakes before they went on a train. So that was one of the more complicated ones, but we do a lot of complicated systems.
It must be really exhilarating when you come up with a solution for something like that. Like I'm thinking about this. I'm like, God, that must be like so cool to like be presented with a problem and then, come like, well, what if we did this? And what if we did, and then you kind of like test and fail and test and fail until you finally come up with that thing that works. And then you're just like, fist pumping, you
And
know?
I personally, throughout my career, have loved that. And
Yeah.
I hope that all the engineers and control panel people that work for R.A.S.P feel the same way. I don't know if they do, but I'm sure some of them do. But yeah, when you finally turn that power on and a machine comes alive and it's doing all these different things and you programmed it and designed it and make it do that, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, is there like a breath holding moment when you first turn it, like when you first hit the
All
switch?
the time, all the time. The first thing is I please don't let me see smoke.
Right, right, right.
I don't
Yeah,
want to hear a spark. I don't want to see smoke. And it does happen occasionally.
yeah,
But hopefully not. But every time you turn something on, if it's in our shop and we're testing it, it's not so scary. But when you put a control system in a plant that's controlling their machinery, it's also safe. Someone can get hurt also. So
yeah.
when you turn that on, it's a little nerve wracking.
I bet, I bet.
Yeah.
And then and then, right, like the air goes out of the room at some point.
Yeah, right. It's like, okay, we're good here. So,
So almost 30 years. How did you even get into controls?
it goes all the way back to my high school years.
Okay.
I was taking BOCES used to have an actual electronics class, which they
Yep.
no longer have, which was very powerful. And I was going to BOCES and I was taking this electronics class, and the professor said, "Hey, there's this company in Mechanicville that needs people to build these panels," which I didn't even know what that meant. So I need some volunteers. So me and one other student raised our hands and said, we volunteer to go to an interview. Well, the other person didn't show up to the interview or never showed up. So I was the
Oh,
only one that showed up. And I ended up getting this job at a company called Rayloyd Tool Company in Mechanicville. And that was many mid 80s, late 80s. And I was building control panels, kind of
okay.
like we do today. They had a product though, so it was the same ones over and over again. So it was a summer job in high school that I started in that industry. Um, Fast forward a few years, after a few years of college, I was 4 years in the Air Force. I went back to that company and now I was designing and programming and building for them. Everything that R.A.S.P does today, I was doing for this company. And that's
Oh,
kind
wow.
of how I got into that industry in the first place.
So you say that I'm always curious, many people start out that own businesses, successful companies, right? They start out in a similar kind of business, similar kind of company, and at some point in time, they make a decision that they want to own their own business. Which, what I tell people, I'm like, yeah, it's a great idea, because I mean, as you know, it's the easiest, it's the farthest thing from easy, right? Because now not only do
Absolutely
you have to
correct.
like be great at what you do, but you also have to figure out how to run a business, which you
Yeah.
probably learn in college, right? Like they don't really teach that. So what was it that made the decision, or was the spark for you to want to leave what you were doing, the safety of a, paycheck, to go out on your own and do your own thing?
I do have a clear recollection of that. It
Oh
was,
yeah.
oh yeah, um, there weren't a lot of people doing what I was doing back then. Uh, this new product came out. It's called a PLC, which is a programmable logic controller, and you program it. So it's instead of doing everything with all these wires, you had this brain, which basically is a computer, but for the industrial world. And not
Hmm.
a lot of people were using them or knew how to program them. And I was doing that. So what was happening is companies around the area were calling me and saying, can you do this? Can you help us? So I was kind of moonlighting and helping all these companies do this.
Okay.
And after about a year of this, I said, whoa, there's an opportunity here. Because let's face it, a lot of businesses start based on an opportunity, right?
Absolutely.
Need an opportunity. So I had all these companies asking me, could you come help us? Could you program this? Could you, our system's down. We don't know how to troubleshoot it. And I found myself trying helping all these companies out. And one day I'm like, wait a minute, there's an obvious need in our area. And maybe it was popular in other areas, around the country, but I was young. It wasn't popular in our area. So I
Yeah.
saw that opportunity and I decided, well, now's the time to make a move. So that's how that all started.
Pre-kids, or did you have kids?
Four kids.
4 kids
Yeah.
making the jump.
Yeah.
And it takes a lot of guts.
Oh, at the time too. So I have four now. But yes, I had two kids at the time.
Okay. Yeah.
And it was scary. I was working for a company. I had health insurance. I had benefits.
Yeah.
Making that move was very, very scary moment in my life. Yeah, no doubt about that.
Did your wife think you were crazy?
So at that time, I was also going through a divorce.
Oh,
So yeah, crazy times,
yeah.
uh, going through that and starting the business and two kids at home. And it was
Chaos, man. I love it.
challenging times.
No shortage of bravery there, man. So that's a cool story. So you saw an opportunity in the market and you just went for it. You took the leap.
Yeah, it was. So what I did at first is in '94, I got a DBA.
Okay.
So I was starting this whole process on my own. Um, so I got a DBA so that I could start doing this. And I was upfront with the company I was working for. There was, nothing behind the scenes. They knew what I was doing. They knew I had the DBA because it wasn't interfering with anything that they do. They had a
Yeah.
product that they made. And what happened was a couple things. One, that company started having a little downturn. You know, things were getting a little slow. And on top of that, I had a couple gentlemen approach me and they said, hey, we have this great idea. And I bought into their idea. And that was we would design and build our own machinery to make a prosthetics.
Oh
And
yeah.
actually build our own machinery and run the machinery and produce the products and sell them. So it was a low volume, high profitability, medical prosthetics. And so I was the electrical. We had one gentleman was the mechanical person, and then we had a mold designer that had history in the prosthetics world. And
Hmm.
that's how the name R.A.S.P was formed by the three of us, with the P being products. So
Okay.
Richards and the other two gentlemen, and that was the plan. So I kind of shifted for a brief period of time from what I was planning on doing, starting my own business in controls, to doing this business of designing our own equipment.
Yeah.
It wasn't soon after the formation of the corporation that the first gentleman got out. So we didn't even get the paperwork back from the state yet, and he changed
Oh
his mind.
wow. Yeah,
Yeah.
that happens. That definitely
So
happens.
he was older, he was established, and he made the right move. If it wasn't right for him, he said, I want out. So now the name R.A.S.P has been formed, and there's two of us in there. So now what do? We can't produce this equipment when we don't have a mold designer. So decided to go back to my original plan, which was
Hmm.
industrial controls. And so myself and this other gentleman said, okay, we're going to pursue that. Um, Fast forward a little bit and ended up getting some pretty substantial work that I couldn't handle. So I hired a gentleman at the time. His name was Michael Close, and he was younger, ambitious, and the two of us were building industrial control panels, and but I was paying him on salary. Um, and at some point we decided him and we gelled. We made a
Yeah.
good team. So we decided to buy the other person out. And around 1997, that's when it was just Michael Close and myself running R.A.S.P.
Now, is that the Mike that I've met? That
That
is,
is the Michael Close that's still here today.
oh, no kidding. No
Absolutely.
kidding.
Yep.
Yeah, he's a nice guy. I like him.
Yeah. So we are now a team. So we have been doing, running R.A.S.P since 97 together.
Wow.
Yep.
That's a long partnership.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Not an easy thing to do, right? Like partnerships are now, I've got business partners, I've had business partners in the past. It's never easy, it takes a lot of work and a lot of communication and
Yeah.
patience. But
We often see each other more than we see our family or our spouses. But,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, I bet. I bet. And how many, yeah, I mean, you guys are, I mean, from my view of things, you guys are a good sized company. Like how many employees do you have now?
Around 35 employees.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's a lot.
It's a decent size. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. For sure. Um, So what does I know I really want to talk to you about the endurance stuff, but I want to make sure that we don't miss anything on the RASP side of things as well.
Sure.
What so what does the future look like going forward for you guys? You're hitting 30 years next year. Are you going to be going for 40, going for 50, or you?
That's a good question. I'm going to be 58 here soon, so I have to start thinking about this. Mike is a few years younger than I am. But yeah, we have to start putting some thought into the long term, of R.A.S.P.
Hmm.
But one thing we've done throughout our history is very slow, steady growth.
Yeah,
And if you did a sales history from the beginning till today, you just see a nice, slow, steady uh, growth of R.A.S.P, which is probably a good way to do it. And that was by design. So as of right now, we're just going to continue down that trend. Long term, we're still trying to work that out, but it's
yeah.
starting to think about it now based on our age.
What I, I'm curious. As a business owner, I've owned a few companies over the last 25 years. The one that I have now, Five Towers Media, the one I've been doing that the longest, right? Marketing. Um, but I always, I've known and seen that, you have to make these pivots along the way, right? Like you go in one direction, kind of like what you're saying. Like you went to controls, but then you kind of started to go towards that prosthetics, but then you pivoted back.
Right.
Uh, as you're growing and you've come up and through pre-internet, internet, social media, tech bubbles, all these things, and now looking at AI in front of us and automations and all these different things are going on. What kind of pivots have you had to make recently? I think would be the most. Obviously you've made some along the way, but have there been recent ones, or do you see with emerging technologies right now any kind of pivots that you feel like you're going to need to make soon, or how does that affect you?
As far as technology goes, industrial controls tend to be a little slower than the rest of the world. So controls in the industrial world tend to be 4, 5, 6 years behind. Um, so AI isn't really affecting us yet, and that may be 3, 4, 5 years down the road. But like everything else, technology is always evolving. We're just
Hmm.
behind and evolving. So
Sure.
we do have to pivot and adjust. One thing that we do is we do a lot of training here. So I have engineers and programmers that are constantly going to training. We stay up to speed on the newest and greatest technology in our world. So that's one thing that we absolutely have to do is stay up to speed on everything that's coming up in the what's going on in the industrial controls world. On
How do
the
you do that?
biz, pardon me.
How do you stay up on that? Like, is there? I mean, are you belong to organizations? Like, is there continuing education? Like, how do you stay up on top of that stuff, or is it just self-educate?
We have good relationships with our distributors, and our distributors have good relationships with the products they sell, the corporations that they represent. And what they do is they'll have training throughout the years, throughout the year. So we send our employees to different training sessions, or the manufacturers will actually come to our facility and they'll do what's called a lunch and learn. They bring in lunch and they'll spend the day training on new products.
Mm,
So it's really working with the manufacturers and the manufacturers representatives to stay up to speed on the technology.
gotcha.
Yeah, that's on the products. As far as the business goes, we always try to stay ahead of the curve. Last year, we put up a new 6,000 square foot building.
Yeah.
Just being proactive. We saw we were starting to get a little tight. Offices were full. We needed more floor space. So being proactive and always being a step ahead has always been one of my goals in running the company. And so that building was put up proactively to look for the future.
Yeah, that's a beautiful building too. I mean,
Yeah, thank you.
I'm sure that was I'm sure it's cheap. Put that
It,
up.
in this economy, it was
I
not
know that's
cheap.
nothing's cheap right now.
Not when it comes to building, no.
Oh yeah. So so let's turn the corner a little quick. Real quick. I don't want to keep you on here all morning, but obviously I seen you running down my road. We've had some conversations about endurance running and races and all that fun stuff. So, tell me a little bit what do you got going on as far as the endurance stuff goes? Are you training? Are you training for the sake of training? Or are you training for an event?
So I work out for my health
Okay.
and I train when I'm going to do an event. So I consider that they're two difference.
Yeah.
Working
Yeah.
out is you don't push quite as hard or as much. But it was 2018. In 2011, I did an Ironman triathlon.
Okay.
And that was a while ago. And then
What was your time?
13:05, I think, maybe 13:10,
Somewhere around there. Okay.
somewhere around there. So
Brutal.
just over 13 hours.
Yep.
And then in 2012, I tried to do another one, but I decided I'm going to push and go hard, and I ended up not finishing.
Oh,
Um, and then I trained again for 2013, and I ended up with an injury and had to bail out a month before the race.
oh, that's awful.
So training for an Ironman is very challenging. And then I didn't do it for 5 years. In 2018, I decided I was going to do it again. And
Hmm.
so I did finish an Ironman in 2018. And then 6 years go by. And in 2024, I decided I wanted to do it again. So yeah, all the running you saw me doing, I was training for an Ironman triathlon.
Did you do it?
I did do it. That was about a month ago. Yes,
The Lake Placid one?
correct.
That's nasty, right? All those hills.
It is nasty. It's grueling.
Yeah, yeah,
But it
man.
is one of the most fun Ironman triathlons or fun triathlons in general. The crowd, the atmosphere, the energy is just so incredible up there. It's just amazing.
Yeah, I'm gonna well, my plan right now is to volunteer next year and then to run it the year after when I turn 50.
Nice.
Um, Although someone just said to me over the weekend that they heard that this was the last one they're doing in Lake Placid, which sounded crazy to me, and I hadn't heard anything else
I
about
have
that.
not heard that.
Yeah, I hadn't heard that either. I think that just might be rumor mill. Um, so you've completed
Three,
3 Ironmans,
correct.
and you started one, but weren't able to finish it. Now, did you get hurt, or did you just go too hard too soon? And
Too hard, too soon. I dehydrate a lot. I sweat up bad, so I dehydrate. It
yep,
was about a mile. So I finished the swim, I finished the bike, and I was around mile 10 in the run,
yep,
and I just keeled over.
no shit.
And I don't remember for about a half hour. An ambulance came, picked me up off the street, and
Wow,
I woke up somewhere.
those
So
are nasty races. Yeah,
yeah, so
man,
that was a bad day. It's you
that was
train,
a
do all
bad
that
day.
training and don't finish, and it seemed like I was so close.
Yeah,
After finishing two and a half events and then not finishing, that stung a little bit, but
yeah, sure it did.
And then
And
I
so
took
in
5 years.
2018, you were 52 when you did that one?
Oh, the well, I'm gonna be 58, so yeah, that was a while ago. That's
Yeah.
probably in my 40s actually.
Oh, okay. They're
Yeah,
getting easier as you get older, right? That's
yeah. Because if that was 10 years ago, it's 2004, that was uh, third 2012 is when I didn't finish. So yeah, well, I was probably around 46.
when you did the next one that you did finish.
The in 2018, yeah, that was just a few years. Yes, I was around 52. Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So so I see you running. So tell me a little bit about your workouts that you are using did you say you're 58 years old?
I will be. Yeah.
So what does training look like for you at 58 years old to run an Ironman? Because I think that's amazing.
Well, I think like a lot of athletes, no matter what your level is, as we get older, we have more pain.
Hmm.
You were mentioning that just at the beginning of this, that you're a little
Yes.
sore. So you know a little bit about that. So
I can't lift my arms up over my shoulders right now. That's
right. Uh, so, when you're training for an endurance race like that, injuries are going to crop up. Knees, lower back, heel, Achilles, arches, and your feet. So what I do personally is I space my workouts. I swim one day, I run another, I bike another, and then I repeat that. So I'm getting 2 days off in between each of those. So,
okay.
so when I run, I'm beating up my legs, but then I don't run for 2 days. I'll bike the next day, I'll swim the
Yep.
next day, and that's how I kind of keep my injuries in check by not doing. I never run 2 days in a row or bike 2 days in a row because
Okay.
I'm trying to keep those injuries under control. So that's one of the challenges for me.
So, and are you doing anything else other than swim, bike, and run, or is it just those three and you train specifically for those, or you do any kind of weights or any kind of other workouts in between that stuff?
Usually Friday's my off day, and I'll go in the gym and do some weights on Fridays.
Okay, so you're training 7 days a week.
Yep,
This is you're like my hero right now, Ron. I was 58 years old, just rushing workouts. Uh, okay. So 7 days a week, but only one event on each one of those days.
correct.
What
Um,
does your nutrition look like?
uh, the so as far as nutrition goes, well, I actually eat less the more I exercise.
Okay.
So, which is a good thing, because obviously we as Americans eat way too much food and eat more than we
Yeah.
need to. So the worst thing for me is when I stop training and then I start eating more. So you got that imbalance of eating more and not exercising. So I tend to eat less when I train. I'm not as hungry, but I do dehydrate severely. So that's one of my challenges. So I have to take that into consideration. I've tested different formulas in my water. If you see me running, I always have a backpack on or a bottle in my hand,
Okay.
and I'll have different formulas mixed in that to give me, depending on how far I'm going. But I need the carbohydrates and all the other things that you need in your fluids. So that's
Yep.
where the bulk of my work is the fluids and getting hydrated. Very challenging for me. This last Ironman race, I actually ran with a backpack on, which I had never done before. Um, and it actually was awesome
With the
because
did you have like a camelback or?
exactly.
Yeah.
And so I'd never done a triathlon with that or run that distance with one before, but it actually worked out great because I could just keep sipping that fluids,
Yep.
every few minutes instead of gulping as you went by an aid station.
Right, right. And are you putting anything in your water in the camelback, or is it just water?
I use liquid IV, which you buy at a store. I
Yep.
tested many things over the years. I've tried homemade formulas. I've tried different things, and I found that one works for me. I just started using it this year, and it just seems to be the perfect balance of everything that I need in my fluids.
Yeah. Are you What about race day nutrition? Are you eating while you're running and biking, or are you just hydrating?
I do eat. I've changed it up over the years. Years ago, I used to take an actual baggie with noodles in it,
Oh
and
yeah.
as I'm biking, I would eat those noodles. This year, tried pretzels.
Okay.
So you're biking for 112 miles, so you have all day, and obviously I kept drinking all throughout all of that. But as far as eating, I did eat two protein bars throughout the bike ride
Hmm.
and a small baggie of pretzels throughout the day, and that seemed to work for me
Helped out. Yeah. Yeah.
because you need something that's not going to upset your stomach too much.
Yeah.
The pretzels seem to give you the carbohydrates you need and the salt, but not, it's not greasy. There was this, I'm on the run, and this little girl was holding out a tray of cookies that she or her family made, and everyone's running by this poor little girl. And I, I actually ran past her about 10 feet, and then I stopped and I went back and I grabbed one of her cookies, and,
Okay.
and I ate this chocolate chip cookie, and it started something because another guy said that looks good, and he stopped. And this little girl was so happy. But about a mile down the road, my stomach was just like, "Oh, you shouldn't have ate that cookie."
Oh yeah.
So nutrition is so important. Um,
Yeah. I know like on some of the endurance events, like so probably the longer ones I've done, it's been like the Spartan Beast at Killington of doing those things. And I think like maybe 17 miles, or maybe 18, maybe was the
yep,
longer one that I did years ago. But I do the goose. And
yep.
I don't know if you ever done the goose or not, but the goose seemed to do okay for me.
If they work for a lot of people, they tend to upset my stomach a little bit, so I don't use those. But
Yeah,
it is ironic how everyone is
everyone's a
so
little different.
different in how we, our body reacts to what we put in it. Yeah.
Yeah, I will say by the end of the day, it does upset my stomach.
Yep.
And I don't know if it's the caffeine or what it is, but after, after you're out in a race for 6 or 7 or 8 hours and you've just been digesting these things every
Exactly.
20
Yeah.
minutes, it's like,
Yep.
yeah. Okay. Um, Training, nutrition, hydration. I wrote down questions wrong. So I was like fascinated ever since I saw you running down the road. I'm like, I think that's Ron. Uh, how did you get into these events anyway? That was one question I was wondering. I'm always curious about.
Well, like a lot of people in my 30s, work, kids, family, I kind of stopped working out.
Okay.
And so one day I'm like, I have to do something. Like I said, I have the typical injuries a lot of people get. I used to get shin splints really bad, running when I was younger. And I'm like, what am I going to do? So I joined this place called the YMCA, which I was never a member of. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to go in this pool and swim. Everyone says
Yeah.
swimming is a great exercise, right? I was not a swimmer. And I kid you not, I get in that pool, and there's these older people, they're swimming back and forth, up and down. And I get in and I go down, back, and my heart's pounding. And after 10, I had to stop. And I stopped and I'm like, and I said to myself, this is a great exercise. I
Yeah.
need to figure this out. So I started going to YMCA swimming. And I could only go up and down 10 times, and I was
Yeah.
exhausted, and these people are swimming back and forth. I was amazed. I was so like enthralled by how these people were doing it. So I kept going and kept going and kept going, 11, 12, 13, 14, and just kept building up those laps. So now swimming became my go-to exercise. Well, a couple of years go by, and I'm in the locker room with a person, and I said, boy, I'm really getting bored of this. And he said, do you ever think about doing triathlons? And I actually said to him, what's a triathlon? I had no
Yeah.
idea what that was. And he explained he's part of this Adirondack Triathlon Club. And you bike and you run and swim. And I'm like, huh, this sounds interesting.
Yeah.
So, first problem is I had no bike. So I said, I'm going to do this. I'm going to sign up for this triathlon thing. I didn't do any investigation, had no idea what it was about. I go down to this bike shop in Saratoga at the time, and I said, I need a bike. And they're like, a bike? And I'm like, yes, I'm going to do this triathlon thing. And they said, oh, we have triathlon bikes. And when he told me how much they were,
Right.
whoa, I'm like, okay, that's your cheap bike? And he said, yes. And I'm like, okay. So I buy their low end triathlon bike. It's
Yeah.
a lot of
Yeah.
money. And I signed up for a triathlon, a sprint, and I still remember going. I had no clue. I didn't do any history investigating. And I just walked around, asked people, what do you do? Where do you put your bike? How do you put your shoes on? And people are
Yeah.
so helpful at these events. They're so polite and helpful. But that's how I got started in triathlons, just by locker room talk.
That's funny.
Yeah.
And yeah, those bikes. It's funny because as we talked, right? So my buddies and I are going to do the sprint, the Lake George triathlon sprint this weekend. Um, I bought just a road bike off of Marketplace for like $300 a couple years ago, so we could do
You're
these.
smarter than I am.
Right? I mean, it's funny because at this point, I've put more into the bike than I actually paid for the bike. As you know, like I just put on a new cassette, new chain, new tires, new tubes. Like just that alone was more than I paid for the bike.
Right.
But we've been talking about like, oh, should we upgrade? Should we get triathlon bikes versus road? Like, what are your thoughts on the equipment? Does it make a huge difference?
Well, if you want to be honest with ourselves, we're probably not good enough to make it a difference. Right?
That's fair.
On a bike, if you're not 22 miles an hour and up, you're probably not getting the advantage. So today I have a very nice high-end triathlon bike, but I don't kid myself at all. If you're not at that level of speed, 22, 24 miles an hour,
Not even close, Ron. Not even close.
and I'm not, so that's not me
Yeah.
either. So yeah, I have a road bike also, and sometimes I'll use that. I like the tri bike because I am comfortable in the aero position.
Yeah.
Riding for a very long time, and I can get down in that position. Your butt lifts off the seat a little bit, takes a little pressure off.
Yep.
So I have a triathlon bike only so I can adjust my positions. When you're riding 100 miles, that makes it more comfortable for me.
That's a long way. That's a long way.
But advantage wise, you're not going to see it unless you're, at those levels.
Which I am not.
Yeah.
All right, good. I'm glad. So I go back and forth with it. I'm like, oh, you get caught up in it. It's like, oh, I need to get a triathlon bike, and then I'm like, well, I mean, realistically,
Yeah. I started out with a triathlon bike, like I said, because I didn't know.
Yeah.
I need a bike for triathlons, and they said, here's a triathlon bike.
Here's a triathlon bike. Makes
So I bought it out of, just pure ignorance. I didn't know what I was buying.
Yep. Yep.
I still have my original bike. I still have it to this day. I still use it.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a little heavy, it's not all super light and all that, but
Right, like the stuff that they have now. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Huh. Yeah. I mean, well, and it's Josh. Josh. So Josh, it's like me and Josh and one of our other buddies. It's like, do I really need a triathlon bike to go out there and race against Josh and Travis? Like, get all caught up in that. But
Yeah, depends how often you do them and
yeah.
what your speed is. And for me, like I said, for me, it's comfort.
I did hear it. So I was talking to someone, they were saying that the triathlon bikes, it really takes a lot off of your quads compared to like what a road bike because of the
Yes,
position.
I've done a little studying on that, and that's what, science says. It does take some of that, workload off the quads. And
Yeah.
if it does, I don't know if I guess I would have to ride a road bike and then run and then ride.
Sure, like kind of test it
I've
out.
never tested that theory, but yeah, you can read a lot of articles about it, and they do say it does make a difference there, but that's not
All
really
right.
writing one.
I'm gonna keep thinking about it. I'm gonna keep thinking about it. So,
Yeah.
if people want to learn more about you and R.A.S.P, where can they find you guys on the old internet?
I'm on LinkedIn. I don't have any other social media platforms that I use.
Yep.
But we do have a website, rasp-controls.com, and there's a little bit of history there. We list all many of our employees are on there and what we do. And so hopefully if someone want to learn more about RASP Incorporated, our website hopefully tells the tale. But me personally, like I said, I'm not on social media, so that's a little harder.
I don't blame you. Ron, I really appreciate you jumping on this morning with me and sharing with us, your story about the company and talking to me about training. And
Absolutely. Thank
uh,
you so much. And I wish
yeah,
you,
absolutely. I knew it was. It was funny because as soon as I saw you running down the road, I'm like, I got to get Ron on the podcast. I got to talk about what he's doing. So I appreciate it, and I'm sure the listeners appreciate it too. So
keep up the training, and we'll see you doing the Olympic next year, right?
Olympic next year, and then 2 years from now, if all goes to plan, Ironman Lake Placid. So
Okay, 2 years from now, my daughter wants to do one in a couple years, so maybe that'll be the year that she does one, and I said I would do it with her, so
oh, nice.
maybe we'll see you up there.
Yeah, so let's see. So next year I'm 48. That's 2025. 2026 I'll be 49. So 2027 is the year for the Ironman. That's the year I
Okay,
turn. So
sounds good.
put it on your calendar.
Yep.
All right, sir. Thanks so much again, Ron. I appreciate it.
Thank you again.
You got it.